Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Chamber's annual county budget update, which is usually a luncheon at the Best Western, but with COVID, we had to go Zoom. And lucky for us that we did, because there's a regular blizzard and ice storm going on out there, but that's not stopping us. We do have Ted here. We've got about 60 folks, I think, who will be on this call. So I want to welcome you all and thank you for coming. I also want to thank our friends at CMC who are actually helping us with this. It's being streamed live on CMC's Facebook page, their YouTube channel, and on Comcast 1086, I think it is, high def. You guys are great. Thank you. Thank you. A couple basic Zoom rules that you should all probably know by now, but let's go over them. If you're not talking, you should be muted. If your video is active, we can see you. So if you get up and go to some other room or have to scratch your ear or something like that, everybody can watch. So you can hide that if you need to. Other than that, we're going to do question and answer at the end. We're going to go over some of our upcoming events and introduce our sponsors. But once Ted's speaking, any questions that you have, you can put those in the chat box at the bottom. So hopefully you all know where that is. That should be at the bottom of your screen. You just click on it and you can type away any questions you have, and then we'll get to you towards the end. I'm trying to think of any other basic Zoom rules. As I think I mentioned this before we went on the air, but you can change your name. It's good to have your first name, maybe your last name, maybe whatever firm that you're from. If you're a guy named Steve Wance, you might want to say you're from the college, or they may think that you're a commissioner. I don't know. So, but you guys, again, you can change your name by hovering your mouse over your face and doing a right click. And at that point, then you can go ahead and change your name. So if Mr. Steve Aquino, the current chair of our board, is on this call, I'd like to ask him to say a couple of words. If not, we'll catch him when he does come in. It's hard to see with all the names here if Steve is in the house or not just yet. Well, Steve, being someone who's not very bashful to speak, hasn't spoken up yet. That tells me he's not on the call yet. So we're going to go right into introducing our sponsors. And events like this do not happen without the wonderful sponsors that we have at the chamber. A lot of people think we're part of the government. We're not. Or they think we're part of some, like, U.S. chamber, Maryland chamber, some larger network where we get support. We're not. We exist basically because of the members we have. We've been around since 1924. We've got 625 actual members right now, maybe a little bit more. And the sponsors are wonderful. And the two sponsors, actually, well, we've got three, but two of them have sponsored this event since before I got here. And I've been with the chamber now for about 10 and a half years. So I want to turn things over to our first sponsor, and that is Miss Sherry Crasium Bolin. I got to get that B out. She's the treasurer of our board, and she's a principal at Brown, Schultz, Sheridan, and Fritz, which used to be called Rager, Lehman, and Hauk, which used to be RLH. But now here she is. I'm turning them over to you.
Thanks, Mike. As Mike says, our name's changed a couple of times over the years, but we've been a proud sponsor of this event for many, many years, and I've been fortunate enough to be representing the firm for the chamber for, wow, at least 5 or 6 of those years in the past. So here again, still the same people here in our Westminster office in Carroll County. Myself as one of the principals, and Wanda Lynn, another principal in our Westminster office, and the whole team continues to grow there on Main Street in Westminster. Just looking back over the past year, I'd like to say a few words normally about the tax law. And a lot of years, it's only 1 or 2 things that changed. Some years there's a lot more, and this year has been more than I've ever seen. So just a few weeks, of course, after we met last year in person, our whole lives changed. And as we were navigating how to run our lives from our homes this past year, we were smack in the middle of tax season last year when all that happened. And we started getting hit very heavily with the Family First Act and then the CARES Act after that. So as a tax professional, I had to switch gears pretty quickly in helping our clients navigate various paid sick leave mandates and family leave, payroll tax credits, all related to that. And then, of course, we had to change our focus to helping clients with PPP loans, navigating stimulus checks and how those things impacted how to get cash flow with idle advances for the SBA. Um, and for the first time ever, trying to get unemployment claims in for self-employed business owners, and all of that right in the middle of tax season. And then just when we knew we couldn't do anything else, they started extending the tax deadlines. But when the IRS does something like that, then we're looking at all 50 states to do what they're going to do and whether they're going to follow those rules or not. So as we head into the summer months, we were dealing with a brand new tax deadline in many areas and all over the country. And then we started thinking, all these things that we did during tax season, all this money that's flowing out of the federal government, the SBA, how are we going to treat this next year on tax returns? So we started to realize that this tax season was going to be another doozy. And it certainly is. There's still tax law coming out. Of course, at the very end of last year, we had a Appropriations Act passed by the federal government, clarifying a few things on the federal level. You saw probably that just the end of last week, we have new Maryland tax legislation that passed with their COVID Relief Act. And some of those provisions, I just probably want to put a plug out there for all the CPAs and tax preparers out there that when your small business is told that, hey, we're not filing your tax return at the same time we did in the past, please be a little patient. We're still waiting on brand new tax forms that really just came into play in Maryland just last week. So, and we don't even have the forms yet. These things will impact your 2020 tax return. So there's still a lot of clarification needed. The Comptroller's office is doing a good job putting some information out there as fast as they can in regards to things that have changed. I'm sure Ted's going to tell you all how this change impacts the county budget as well when he gets to his part. But as a taxpayer, small business owner, we're all impacted by this and the changes that are coming. And it's going to take a lot of patience. They haven't extended the deadlines yet this year, but I'm not going to be surprised at all with all the changes that are coming here of late and still getting through the local and state and federal government legislation that we could very well be looking at an extended deadlines as well again this year. And even if they don't do something as far as a deadline extension like they did last year, I'm going to think that a lot of people are going to be extending their tax returns this year as well. And that's going to have an impact, I'm sure, everywhere around us. But just a few things to note. BSSF is very, very in tune with our community, the business community. We offer free webinars on various topics as they've been coming out. So if anybody here is ever interested in being on our newsletter, blogs, we try to stay very up to date and informing all of our clients and the business community. You all are welcome to be signed up for those. You do not have to be a client either. So please feel free to reach out to me at any time to get on those lists so that you have access to that valuable information real time. So thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Sherry. You guys are great. I see Mr. Quinos with us, so maybe I will slide him in between the sponsors if that's okay. Steve is the chair of our board. Somehow he didn't have a link to the meeting. I'm sure when this is all
how does that happen?
It's going to be my fault. It's going to be my fault. I know it. So
of course, I left my phone upstairs, so I couldn't even get a hold of it. I just bit it coming down the stairs. So
well, we got you now. Anyway, Steve was the chair of our board when I first started 10 years ago, and he's back again for the 10-year anniversary. We figure we'll bring him back every 10 years as I keep on going. But anyway, Steve, the floor is yours for a minute.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you again for having me in this position, Mike, and the rest of the board and the rest of the members. I'm really looking forward to obviously this upcoming year to serve as chair. I know we got a lot of being very creative and doing a lot of interesting things to try to make sure that our membership is still staying connected and still being able to have the availability to events and all the things that we've done in the past in this new times that we're in. So, at the end of the day, we're going to make it a great year. We're all going to stay strong together. We're going to make sure that everybody stays successful. And, the chamber's here to support you. And and I look forward to being a part of that. So there's my words of wisdom, Mike.
Thank you so much, Steve. I appreciate that. And now we move on to our next sponsor. Once again, these guys have been great. They've been with us, like I said, since I came on board. They've sponsored this every year. And I know this man from other aspects too. Our kids went to school and I think our wives work together. So we just need to go out and have a cigar together now. So anyways, I want to introduce you to Mr. Dave Peliquin, owner of Main Street Advisors. Dave, they're all yours.
Great. Thanks, Mike. It is nice to co-sponsor with former Rager, Lehman & Houck, but now BSSF, the state of the county finances. You got a CPA firm and a registered investment advisor. It makes sense. We talk about cash flow planning a lot at Main Street Advisors with our clients. My few words of wisdom that I would put out is what I kind of say almost every year, which is be sure that that when you're planning for your retirement, you've taken into account how Social Security claiming might be explored. So whether do you take it at full retirement age? Do you try and delay out till age 70, as you hear a lot of financial planners tell people? Combining that in with any pensions, with any IRAs and such that you might have. There's software now that is so much better than it was just 5 or 8 years ago that I've been using now for about 2 years and really embracing, frankly, with existing clients and with consultations. If you go to our website at mainstreetadvisors.com, we've been in business since 1999 and we're fiduciaries, and consultations, there's some price points to cover if it's just one issue you want to look at, or if retirement is looming. The big comprehensive look is I would highly recommend, where we take into account every last need, wish, want you have, and what all your assets are and where they are, and whether it's IRA, whether it's a employee stock options. All of that goes in a basket. We put in all the scenarios that you should or might encounter, plug in what fears you might have of whether it's nursing home because mom or dad unfortunately went that way, or scenario planning is important. So you can check us out on our website. It's always a pleasure every year. It's cool to see that we do it even in COVID, even in a blizzard. We're still doing it, or everybody's sitting in their own location, and yet we're all getting together and hearing, the state of the county's finances. So with that, I'll give it back to you, Mike.
Dave, thank you so much. Before I go to the next sponsor, I do want to recognize, normally speaking, if we were doing this live, I'd be recognizing all the elected officials, all the appointed officials, all the past chairs of the board. It's just a little bit too hard to do that looking at the screen. I'm afraid I would miss someone. You guys know who you are. I want to thank you. Of course, Steve will say that I didn't do it this year because it's going to be tricky introducing him as a past chair and the current chair. But that's not what I was doing here, Steve. Okay.
You'll figure it out, Mike.
All right. Very good. All right. So our last sponsor is a guy who has been so great to work with us. So many of our events get so much extra mileage because we have our friends at CMC help us. And as you heard me in the beginning say, this thing's being streamed all over the place, maybe even out to Mars by these guys. They are amazing. And I want to introduce you to Mr. Richard Turner, Executive Director of CMC and member of the Chamber Board. Richard.
Great, thanks, Mike. We haven't hit Mars yet. Maybe that's in our future plans, though. It's great to see everyone, and we at the CMC are really proud to be the Chamber's media and streaming partner and help get the great content presentations like this one out to our community. I know, like many of you, I look forward to this annual rite of the coming spring, in which we get to hear about maybe some positive news from Ted. So this is really a great opportunity to hear about what we can look forward to in terms of the coming year and what we can do as our part in our community. By now, most of you probably know my favorite Super Bowl commercial. It encourages us to eat local. So I want you to keep watching local by supporting CMC. You can check out our YouTube, make sure you click on the subscribe link, and that way you'll get the updates so you know when new videos like this one are available. I also want to thank our great team at the CMC that they're the ones who really make this happen. I get some of the credit and some of the FaceTime, but really they're behind the scenes making it happen all the time. So I really appreciate them. Big thing goes out to them making it happen. So thanks, Mike. Back to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go over really fast some upcoming events that we have, and you can find all these by going to the Chamber's website, carrollcountychamber.org. We have a calendar of events. I've got notes scribbled all over the place on this thing, so the order has changed. So just give me, I want to make sure I get them right. The first one that I want to mention is coming up February 24th, 11 o'clock. It's our energy purchasing co-op. It's a benefit that we offer to members that they sometimes seem to realize can absolutely positively save you the cost of your dues. I know this because my last job, I was actually vice president, customer service for a builder of homes. I learned if you do it right, people seldom call and say, hey, another great month to write the mortgage check. I love my house, thanks. But if you do it wrong, you hear a complaint. And I've been selling this for 10 and a half years and no one has complained. It's legitimate. You can save the cost of your dues. So you may want to plug that in, February 24th, 11 o'clock. Next, February 25th is a new event that we just started with Steve. This was his idea, and so we're doing it. 8 o'clock in the morning, it's called Chat with the Chair. Steve and I are on there, and you just get on for about 40 minutes or so, and we just talk about what's going on, ideas of yours, if you need some help, whatever. So it's something new. I think you'd enjoy it. It's just kind of sitting around having a cup of coffee. Next event, February 25th from 4 to 5, we're doing a virtual PM connection. You're going to want to be involved in this one because it's a whole new way to do it. We have another actual platform. You need to get on a little bit early to set yourself up, but believe me, I think you're going to like it. For all the times that we can't get together and network and get to know folks face to face, this is better than Zoom. You're going to enjoy it. Next event, we've got 2 new member orientations, which is not just for new folks. If you've been a member for a long time and you want to get refreshed on what we do, if you've got a friend who's not a member and you want them, in fact, the last one we did, 6 of the folks on this call were not actually members. So we've got one March 11th at 8:30 in the morning and one March 24th at 12:30. My next event, March 11th, we have an after-hour PM connection, and we're trying to find a creative way to handle that one as well. Stay tuned, but it's on the calendar. Next, March 18th, it's at noontime, at the time that our normal luncheon would be in March. This one is going to be done via Zoom, and it's the Carroll COVID-19 update. We're going to have Ed Singer from the Health Department and Commissioner Rothstein. So we'll get a chance to hear from them, what's going on, vaccines, and you can ask lots of questions. Next event, May 18th, we're bringing them back. We had them last year. We had about 400 on the Zoom call, and this is going to be free. Aniban Basu. If you've never heard of this guy, he is hysterical. Look him up. Economic wizard who could also be doing like an actual comedy act. He's very, very good. Next, Leadership Carroll class of 2022 starts in September. We're taking applications right now. Just go to our website. And last but not least of my announcements, the Carroll Biz Challenge. It's our 10th year. This is our marquee event. It's an amazing event. And the grand prize this year, because it's our 10th year, is going from $5,000 cash up to $10,000 cash. So if you know somebody who's an entrepreneur with a business in Carroll, either been in business for less than a year or hasn't opened it up yet, they want to go and apply for this, and it's free. So if anybody has any questions, just go to our website, carrollcountychamber.org. And that's the end of my announcements. So I don't think I missed any. So now I get to turn you over to the person that you really came here to hear from. And he is... Ted is an amazing guy. He's director of management and budget for Carroll, and he's been doing that job for countless years. And what I've always been impressed with is Ted's an appointed person. So every time we get a new group of commissioners, it seems like they keep bringing him back, and they bring him back because he's expert at what he does. He's respected around the state. We're very, very lucky to have him. This is, I think, year number 18 that he comes and talks to us about this. And he is a hysterical guy. Ted is going to keep you laughing the whole way through. No, Ted's a little bit dry at times, but he's funny. And he's promised me only good news. So I'm turning things over to Mr. Ted Zaleski. Ted, they're all yours.
Mike gives you that promise every year, and every year I give him a heartbreak. Richard said I'm a rite of spring now. That's really... I've never had that before. I feel like I've moved up in the world, and do want to thank the CMC. I don't know the details, but I know they were doing some scrambling today to figure out how to keep this event on for you. So thank you to all of you guys. Over the years, we've done this event in at least 3 venues that I can recall. Lots of different room arrangements. Some of you might remember from time to time I've commented that I liked or didn't like an arrangement because of how easily I could escape if things went bad. I never anticipated doing this from my house. On the good side, though, escape is easy. None of you even know where I am. So we're doing this virtually. And I don't know if any of you have ever seen me, but I do interviews of authors of books. And typically that's person to person and on a stage in front of an audience. But same thing has happened to me there. I've had to do a handful of these interviews now, much like this. And it's been a bit of a learning experience trying to figure out how do you make that work. And I had to think about this event in the same way. You just can't do it quite the same way. And I've always looked at this event a little bit like a reunion. It's a gathering of people from all kind of different places. For me personally, different parts of my life. And it's disappointing that we can't be together. And I even miss Mike McMullen. Some other names to mention, in this idea of a reunion, Tony Eckert from the library sent me an email this morning thanking me for ruining a perfectly good snow day by still holding this event. I saw Lynn Wheeler in the audience, one-time director of the library. She's still coming back to see me, even though she's no longer, doing that job. A Lynn story I don't think I've ever told you guys. When she was retiring, I spoke at her retirement, and those of you who know Lynn know she's a kind of enthusiastic sort of person with lots of nice things to say. So when I was talking about her at the retirement, I said, when Lynn's not around and I'm no longer incredible, fabulous, and fantastic, how am I going to go back to just being a normal person again? And it's been a struggle without Lynn to tell me how wonderful I am. And then I also saw Mike Mason. I never see him anymore, but know him from years ago on the Carroll Community College board. And there's a lot of people like that. If I could see the whole screen, I could go around kind of the room and talk about people. And I've learned something here today. Mike said there's about 60 people signed up for this. Now, when we do this in person, we get about 100 people. So I'm thinking, well, what does this mean that only 60 people showed up when they don't have to make any effort to be here? And I think probably the message is people are coming to my lunch to listen to me, not because they want to hear me, but it's a chance to get out of the office. So we'll have to see what happens next year. So I said I had to figure out how to do this, had to make some adjustments. One of the really hard things for me is knowing if I'm connecting with the people that I'm talking to. Mike talked about me being funny, and I do try to have a little bit of fun in these meetings, but you can't hear people laugh. You don't know if you're succeeding or bombing. Now, if I had planned better, I could have sent copies of this to all of you, but I'm going to show you something I brought along with me. If you were laughing at something I said, you could have held this up. If you were laughing really hard at something I said, you could have held this up. If I caught your attention and you were really listening to what I was saying, you could have held this up. If I was worrying you or scaring you a little bit, could have held this up. And this is the one I hope nobody would use. But if in fact I was boring you, you could have held this up. But I didn't plan ahead. I didn't get them to you. So I'm just going to have to hope that you're laughing at the right places and paying attention in the right places. So it's been an interesting year. We held this event last year on February the 20th, shortly before most of us heard the words coronavirus and COVID-19 for the first time. And it's been just 2 days less than a year, but seems like a very, very long time ago to me. I remember when this all first hit pretty early on, we pretty much emptied out the county office building. Almost everybody went home. I continued to go into work. But I was working in a mostly empty building, and I actually got kind of used to that pretty quickly. It wasn't all bad. But I noticed an interesting thing as I was doing that. Even though my schedule was much emptier, things weren't as hectic, I wasn't talking to as many people, I felt like I was going home at the end of the day more tired than I was in other circumstances. And I'm not sure I can fully explain it, but I guess just dealing with everything that was going on, was still a weight of some sort. So I looked at the presentation I did last year, and the very last thing I said to you was, a recession is coming. Now, when I said that, I also said, I'm not predicting when. I don't know when it's going to happen, but we were in the longest U.S. economic expansion ever. And I said, it's going to end. It has to end sometime. So yes, I said a recession was coming, but I want to be clear. I totally reject the idea that I was somehow responsible for this COVID-induced recession. So everybody's supposed to be laughing now. Okay, so not long after we met last year, I started thinking about and worrying about, okay, what's this going to mean for the county? What do we do with this? We had nothing even remotely similar to say, well, this is kind of like this other thing that happened. And at the time, my thinking about what might this mean really didn't extend beyond June 30th, the end of our fiscal year. And given what's happened now, it's hard to look back and think about that. But at the time, I think a lot of us were hoping that this was going to be something that lasted a few weeks, and then we would get back to normal again. So when I was planning for June 30th, I felt like I was planning for a what if that I didn't really expect. I was just trying to be prepared. Little did I know that a year later, we were still going to be dealing with all this. So when I did try to say, what might this mean to us back last year, fiscal year 20, what I told the commissioners was that I thought we could see a loss of revenue of up to $4 million a month as long as a shutdown lasted. And for context, our operating budget is a little over $400 million. So when we're talking about $4 million a month, that matters to us, or would have mattered to us. But it didn't happen. We didn't lose $4 million a month. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. Now, like I said, we didn't anticipate that we were going to still be dealing with this February. But the commissioners did recognize that there was uncertainty. There was a lot we didn't know about how this was all going to work and how it would impact us. And one thing they did when they adopted the fiscal year 21 budget, the year that we're in now, they adopted a budget that was actually a little bit smaller than the previous year, fiscal year 20. And they did that basically saying, with the uncertainty we're facing, we shouldn't be committing ourselves to additional spending. We need to hang on to some flexibility in case things do get bad. It didn't take long where we started to get the idea that this wasn't going to be over in a few weeks. And we had to start thinking a little bit differently. Thinking about June was not thinking about a unlikely what if. We needed to go further. So we started thinking about what might this mean in fiscal year 21. And before I do that, I want to talk about people. I meant to say this. Dave Bollinger, I believe, has been at every one of these presentations going all the way back to 2004, I think was the first one. I was looking through the participants and I didn't see him on here. I'm hoping this isn't the end of the streak. I mean, this is right up there with Cal Ripken and Lou Gehrig. This would be a heartbreaker if he's going to miss this one. Okay, so back to our problems. We had to start thinking longer. What might this mean in fiscal year 21? Now, there was one thing that we were able to react to very quickly. That's when interest rates pretty much plummeted to almost zero in about 10 minutes. So one thing we were able to act on, something that was easily quantifiable, was we weren't going to have the investment income that we had been planning on. And we pulled about $5 million a year out of our operating plan. So that was immediate impact to us. Now, because it was that fast, that was part of our adopted plan. So it's already built into our thinking. It's not a problem we need to solve, but it's part of the problem we have now. Okay, now trying to think through 21, and I'm not going to bore you with the details, but we tried to say what might happen to us, and we thought that we could see a loss of $30–40 million in fiscal year 21. And remember, that's on a budget of a little more than $400 million. So that kind of change would have been a big deal for us. We had no way to absorb something like that. Now, I told you a minute ago that we didn't have the impact we feared in fiscal year 20. And in 21, that we're only partway through the year, but it looks like we're not going to see the impact we feared in fiscal year 21 either. Now, why is that? How can that be? This is me getting your attentive look now. You all have seen what's going on. Businesses have gone out of business. Businesses are still alive, but not operating. Businesses are operating at less than their full capacity. People have been laid off. You know, in a matter of weeks, when COVID hit, the job loss across the country quickly reached the same amount of losses through the whole Great Recession, except it happened in a matter of weeks, not over the course of a year or however long that was. You all probably know somebody who lost their job because of this and is still not working, or is working but has a job lesser than what they once had. So you've seen all that. You know, it'd be pretty hard not to ask the question, okay, well, if all that has happened, how can that not have had an impact? And our second largest revenue, about a third of our budget, is income tax. So a lot of what I was just talking about is very directly relevant to income tax. And yet I'm telling you, we didn't get hurt. And there is an answer, and it's a very simple one. It's the federal stimulus. I should say now the stimuli, because we're on to our second one. The stimulus did what it was intended to do. Now, whether you agree with the role the federal government is playing here or not, I'm just saying in a practical way, what happened here kept us out of fiscal difficulty. Some jobs were protected, some paychecks were protected. A lot of people got unemployment insurance that they would not have gotten. All those things shielded us from the loss of income tax, which was the main driver of those concerns that I was telling you about. It has kept us afloat. Now, in doing this, the federal deficit has increased greatly. And I'm fully expected to hear Dave Peliquin talk about the federal deficit when he did his sponsor talk, but didn't happen today. And this is something that's going to have to be dealt with someday, but that's a story for another time. For right now, the story is the federal actions have kept us going. Then the other big change that we need to think about now is not so much a fiscal one, but one that, again, is going to help us avoid the fiscal problems, and that's the creation of the vaccines. People are getting vaccinated now. And here's the big thing that I'm looking at. If the stimulus can keep us going until the vaccines have the impact that we're all hoping for, meaning we can kind of start getting back to normal again, if they can carry us that long, then maybe we get through this without any more negative impact. When I say negative impact, I'm only talking about, you know, the county fiscal situation. There are all kinds of other bad things happening, but maybe we get through. You know, a few months ago, I would not have seen that path as even remotely possible. I would have said to you, we are going to get hurt. The only questions are how badly and when does it happen? Now I see a path where maybe we get through this and we really come out okay. And for me, this is really, I mean, this is a huge change. I just really didn't see this coming, but it's made all the difference in the world for us. So some of you might have seen an article recently in the Times about the surplus that we're projecting for fiscal year 21. And I want to talk a little bit more about that for a second, but I'm going to take a little turn to the side here for a second, having mentioned the Times. I also saw a report that a nonprofit organization is looking at buying the Sun papers and also the Times. And I think this is really exciting and important news. And I say that for a lot of reasons, but right now I'm saying it in terms of being somebody involved in local government. You know, local governments, local newspapers have been hurt badly by newspaper consolidation and by loss of advertising revenue. And they are not the force that they once were. I used to talk regularly with local reporters. Yeah, it was just a part of, if not the day, a part of every week. I rarely do now because there aren't any reporters. We have so few now. They don't have time to spend digging into what's going on and what the world ought to know about. When we have an active local paper, or at one time papers, that added to my workload, but I think that's as it should be. They should make me explain to the public what we're doing and why we're doing it. Now, I like to think that I do that anyway. That's part of my approach to how I do this job, but not everybody does. And sometimes people do things that they just shouldn't do. And local newspapers keep the light on that stuff. So I think this is a really big deal, and I'm hoping that this works out. Okay, so back to our fiscal situation. We had all these scary projections that didn't become real. But now we're saying we're looking at the possibility, the probability of a healthy surplus for fiscal year 21. How can that be? And again, it seems like this doesn't fit with everything else that we're hearing. Now, we've had unexpected expenditures because of the COVID situation, but we've also had unexpected revenue because of the COVID situation. Federal relief included about $29 million that went to Carroll County government and the Carroll County Health Department. And we have been working very closely with the health department as we try to handle what's going on. And a year ago, who thought Ed Singer would be the most prominent face in Carroll County? But you can't look anywhere without running into Ed these days. So COVID-driven expenditures haven't been a problem for us. And we've actually had some expenditures decrease because there are some government activities that just aren't happening the way they used to. So we budgeted for them, but they're not happening. One example, you think about senior centers. Our senior centers have been closed for months, and we don't know when they're going to open up again. So there's money that would have been spent that's not being spent. And there's things like that throughout the organization. Now back to income tax. For fiscal year 21, income tax revenue is going to exceed budget by a good bit. And I say is going to. We still have 5 months to go. Things could change. But with what we know now, I feel fairly comfortable saying we expect to exceed by a good bit. And Sherry talked about some of the complications of tax changes. Yes, it has complicated my world as well. One of the really hard things we have to do is try and figure out how much income tax to count on. And we have nowhere near enough information. The way the money gets to us makes it really hard to know what's happening. But these extended deadlines, tax law changes, it just muddies the water even more. It's so hard for us to know. We can see how much money is coming in, but it's hard to know what that money means. How much of this is something we can count on for the future? And that continues to be a big problem for us. But income tax revenue is going to be higher than expected, in part because of the federal stimulus and how that shielded us. Now, the part that played was basically in income tax not going away. That doesn't explain why it went up, but explains why it didn't go away. The other part, and this is the big part of why we're going to have more than we expected, is because of how those income tax distributions come from the state comptroller's office to the counties. And we don't have time for me to explain that process, but the important thing to understand here is it takes 3 fiscal years for us to get all the money related to a tax year. So it takes a long time before we fully match up all the money that you paid in taxes that went to the state and then came to us. And now we've received what we're supposed to receive. What's going on right now and is driving this increase in income tax is we're getting a lot of money related not to tax year 20, but to tax years 18 and 19. That's helping us right now, but that has nothing to do with where we'll be next year or the year after that. We have to be very careful to try to, as best we can, separate what is about money from other years and what is about what's actually happening now that we should build into our projections. And one of the really hard things I have to do right now is manage expectations, because people see me reporting how much income tax is going up, and almost everybody immediately jumps to, oh, things are great. Let's get back to normal. Here's what we'd like to spend money on. And I have to keep telling people, no, that's not quite where we are. This isn't ongoing money. This is short term. This is one-time money. We have to be very careful how we choose to make use of this money. Then there's another revenue that was a bit of a surprise to us, and that's recordation tax. This is basically a tax on real estate transactions. Now, this is our 3rd largest revenue, but much, much smaller than income tax. But when we adopted the 21 budget, we backed off of our expectations for recordation tax. And looking back, I don't see that I would have done anything differently, but we know now we were wrong. Our thinking was people aren't going to be out there looking for homes. They're not going to be going around neighborhoods, going into other people's houses and saying, I want to look at a house. So we figured home sale activity was going to be down, recordation tax would be down. We were wrong. Not only were we wrong, but we were hugely wrong. Not only did we not see a dip, we are seeing activity in home sales like we haven't seen for years. Our recordation collections are beyond anything I could have even guessed would happen to us. So that is also contributing to this idea of a year-end surplus. But like I was saying with income tax, there's nothing that's happening with this activity that leads me to think we should draw a line into the future that just extends what we're seeing today. At some point, we have to figure that most of the people who are looking to buy a house, and of course we know this is a lot of this is driven by very, very low interest rates. You know, how long will we have those low interest rates? And how long before everybody who wants a house has found it and has acted? I don't believe we can even remotely think we can extend this activity into the future and into our revenue projections. So we still have 5 months to go in our fiscal year. Things could change. And one of the big things that could change is we've only seen about a quarter of our income tax so far. We'll get our next big distribution in just a week or two. And then the hardest thing for us is we get about half of all our income tax revenue after the commissioners have made all the decisions they need to make on the next budget. And knowing that there is still uncertainty out here, I can't say with any confidence that something couldn't happen at the end of this fiscal year that changes this picture. You know, I don't see it throwing us into a negative position, but maybe it won't be as strong a positive as the one we're looking at right now. Oh yeah, you know, and Dave Peliquin mentioned property tax. I should mention that as well. I mean, that's more or less on target for us in fiscal year 21. But our last reassessment was 7.8%. We had built in, I believe, 6.2%. So this was better than we expected. And I think the first time we've had an actual assessment be this much more than what we built into our budget since back before the Great Recession. An odd thing in here, and I mentioned this to you last year as well, while our total reassessment was up 7.8%, our commercial was up 4.5 and residential was up 8.9. We had the same kind of thing last year where the commercial was lower than the residential. And I don't believe I ever remember that happening before last year. Now we've had it happen 2 years in a row. And I'm really not sure what to make of it. This might be a good time to mention another worry for the future, something we're watching with commercial real estate. You know, with so many places shutting down and so many people working from home, there's a lot of businesses now that have to be rethinking their business model on how and where people work. Some businesses, I think, are saying, you know what, this works. We don't need office space, or maybe we don't need as much office space as we had. It's pretty hard to not to think that there's going to be some pullback in commercial office space. And what are the implications of that going to be? What will that do to the real estate market? Now, for us, this might not be a really big worry, though, because Carroll County doesn't have a huge amount of commercial office space. We likely would not be impacted as much as some other counties might be, but something on my mind. But then there are other things happening, you know, that could go the other way. You know, some companies like Amazon are taking up untraditional space that's been abandoned by businesses to have kind of mini distribution centers. You know, they get merchandise to a certain place to then go out other places. So maybe we're going to find real estate used in ways that we hadn't anticipated before. So back to that surplus. As things stand, we're projecting that we would end the year with about a $19 million surplus. Now, for context, again, that's about 4.5% of our budget. That is more than I would expect in a typical year, but that's not crazy news. You know, that's well within the realm of reasonable possibilities for what we'd end the year, because every year just depends on what happened in that particular year. What happened with revenues, what happened with expenditures. Now, I mentioned that in the last budget process, the commissioners made some decisions to retain flexibility in case things got bad. Another thing they did was to build up what's called our unassigned fund balance. Think of this as a savings account. They said, let's put some money aside so that we have some flexibility if things get bad and we have to make some decisions. And the big thing that doing this does, it keeps you from making decisions you really don't want to make, but are forced into because you have to balance the budget. And one thing to remember with local government, we have no choice on that. We always have to balance the budget. So the commissioners had put some money aside. We're looking at some more money available at the end of the year. If we add those together and it plays out the way we've talked about so far, we're looking at approximately $50 million, or about 12% of our budget. In one way, that's a very good place to be right now. We're still facing uncertainty. It's nice to know we have that money on the sideline so that we can take time to make thoughtful decisions if we need to. But on the other hand, I wouldn't suggest holding on to that much money for the long term. So in this budget process, I will be talking to the commissioners about some possibilities that we can consider. One thing is, I think we should take this opportunity to hold on in an ongoing way, to make this a new practice for us, to have this savings account. We have an opportunity here that I never expected. I wouldn't have chosen this way of getting to it, but now that it's here, we have an opportunity. And we can talk about exactly what you do with that. But I think it might not be unreasonable for us to talk about keeping a 5% savings account. And one of the things that really appeals to me in doing this, the Great Recession hurt us. Our recovery has been modest. We've lost a lot of flexibility. We just don't have room to deal with uncertainty in the way we once did. I spend time talking about small changes in our revenue projections that 15 years ago I wouldn't have done, just because we're worried that if it changes in the bad way, we just don't have the room to take it up. And the other side is when you have unexpected expenditures. We have some room for dealing with unexpected expenditures, but not a huge amount. And sometimes, the state will make decisions for us that we can't plan for. And it gets harder and harder to have to be able to make up for the choices that they're making. So having some money on the sidelines makes it easier to live through those things. A second thing I'm going to be suggesting to the commissioners is that we look at our capital program and places where we anticipate selling bonds, taking on debt. Maybe we make some choices to fund some projects with cash instead of with new debt. We take on less debt, we take on less debt service. That reduces pressure on our operating plan, on the bottom line of what we're looking at when we compare our revenues and our expenditures. And then another thing I want to talk to them about is our infrastructure. The county owns a lot of things. You think about buildings and roofs and HVAC systems, roads and bridges, stormwater ponds, storm drains, parks. We have a lot of stuff, and over time it ages and needs to be renewed. We've been working for years to try and get our arms around just what does that look like, and are we doing enough? And my guess is we're not doing enough, but we don't know enough to quantify it yet. But this could be an opportunity to get a few things done that we might not have been able to get done. Take a little bit of the pressure off that idea of renewing infrastructure. Now, a lot of what we've been talking about is what happened last year, what's happening now, but we also need to think years into the future, or I believe we need to think years into the future. And part of what Carroll County does is we don't just adopt a budget, we adopt a budget plus 5 planned years beyond that. We look at our revenue expectations and we look at what is the cost in the future of continuing the services we're offering today. If things are going right, the revenue number should be bigger than the expenditure number. Right now for us, that is not true. I told you we got hurt in the recession. Our recovery's been modest. The state has done some things to change our picture. Other things have happened around us. And if circumstances now put us in a position where, as we look ahead, it doesn't seem that revenues will be enough to cover the expenditures that we've committed to. And the plan that we have right now is actually not even the whole picture, because we have some things we know we're going to be dealing with that we have not built into the plan yet. One of those, we've talked about this conceptually, but we've moved a long way from last year, is the move to a combined fire EMS force, where we will continue to make use of our volunteers, but we are now adding to that with a career force. Things are in motion. We have a director in place. Conversations are on the way on how that is all going to work. How will this combination be set up? And we've spent that year trying to get a handle on how much more is this going to cost us beyond what we budget today. And this is tricky because there's a lot of things that are hard to answer, hard to quantify. But we've gotten to a point now where we think we might be looking at something like $7 million a year beyond what we've already planned for. So when I say we're out of balance, we also need to think about another $7 million maybe on top of that out of balance. Minimum wage changes have been legislated. Now we have meeting the law built into our plan. That's covered. That part's not a big problem. But if you think about your pay scales, those of you who have any significant number of employees, if minimum wage moves up to here, you now have a question about, well, what are the people who are already at that spot? And as you start thinking that through, that ripples throughout your entire pay scale. What are we going to do about that? And we have no answers. I don't know. But if we're going to do anything other than meet the law, there's going to be some additional cost that we haven't planned yet because we don't know what it is. Some legislation that we anticipate happening, that's going to be Annapolis telling us that law enforcement needs to use body-worn cameras. There will be a cost to buying cameras. There will be a cost to replacing cameras over time. But the big concern for us here is people. We're going to have a lot of video to store and manage. We're going to have requests for video. This is going to take time and probably little reason to think that we can absorb it with the people we have. So it's going to be positions that we have not planned for yet. Now, there are lots of other things. Those are some of the big ones, but there are other things in the mix. So the big message is here, we already are out of balance in the future, and we've got challenges that we haven't built into that yet. So we're going to have things we need to think about. Now, I'm not going to talk about this as long as I usually do because we talked about a lot of other stuff, but on the state budget, last year I told you the governor's budget was only balanced if he could get $530 million worth of legislation changed. That is where laws in place that already said, Governor, you need to include this in your budget. He didn't, so he needs a law to change for it to actually be balanced. $530 million is a big deal. This year, same situation, except he needs almost $1 billion worth of legislative change. Will he get that change? What parts will he get? What won't he get? And what impact will that have on other things? State funding to schools is a big piece of that is driven by enrollment. School systems across the state have seen a noticeable drop in enrollment because of COVID, because of school closures, parents pulling their kids out and either homeschooling or sending them to private school. The governor's budget would include funding to hold school systems harmless from this short-term loss in enrollment. What that will mean in the future, we don't know yet. And another thing we don't know, counties have a legislated floor to school funding. I don't know yet how the state is going to allow us to deal with this change in enrollment. We're going to be watching that with interest. Another change, the governor has proposed legislation that would exempt unemployment insurance from income tax. This matters to us. We've been talking about income tax. This would be a loss of revenue, and it would be applied both to calendar year 20 and 21 and beyond. So this would actually not just be loss of revenue in the future, but loss of revenue that we thought we already had, and very hard to know how big an impact this is going to be. State sometimes chooses to pass costs on to us. We already pay half of the cost of the State Department of Assessments and Taxation. Those of you who have been to this before have heard me talk about this. State Department, state employees, they run it, they make the decisions. We counties have nothing to do with it other than we write a check for half the cost. The governor's budget would have this go to 90% of the cost. That would be another $500,000 a year to us. And just to be clear, nobody's any better off because of this. Nothing new gets done. The only thing that happens is the state used to pay $500,000. Now we would pay $500,000. A lot of talk last year about the Kerwin Commission, blueprint to the future legislation. This is all about a major funding change to schools, something like $4 billion over 10 years. Legislation passed, the governor vetoed it. Everybody expects the legislature to override that veto. The big question will be, how will the legislation change? And it almost certainly will. Because when they passed it, they didn't know how they were going to pay for it. Their situation has deteriorated since then. So it's hard to imagine that they think it could just go on as it was. Now, with the legislation as it was, Carroll County would have picked up no additional obligation. Will legislative changes change that? Will some new funding obligation come to us that we're not planning on now? Tied to that same legislation was some school construction funding. We talked about this a little bit last year, a parallel process with the Maryland Stadium Authority building schools. And this is tied to casino revenue. And I questioned this last year. The plan was to issue debt backed by casino revenue. And I said, well, what happens if casino revenue doesn't come through the way they expect, or if it falls away over time? Seems like a worry. Now here we are. Casinos got killed this year. Don't know what this means for the future, but this is a good illustration of why I thought that was a concern. Okay, so the good news, the news is good in the short term. We've got some problems yet to deal with in the long term. There's still uncertainty in front of us, lots of questions to be answered. I guess the big thing I want people to walk away from this with, if nothing else, is even though it looks like there's a lot of money sitting around right now, that doesn't fix the ongoing picture and doesn't put us in a position to take on new ongoing costs. So I'll stop there and then we can take whatever questions you would like. And I guess, Mike, you want to walk them through how we'll handle questions?
Yes, sir. Thanks, Ted. Yeah, anybody have questions? That's what the chat box is for. Hopefully you guys know where that's at. If you don't, it's at the bottom of your screen. You just click on chat, type in your question. Give them a couple of seconds to. I had a few questions, but you covered them. I was writing them down and you covered them while you were talking. So
Always like to hear that.
I know that was good. That was good. Dave Pellick, you always have a question or two. Come on. And I believe, Ted, just to keep you plugged in, there are 60 on this call. However, by the time we do the count of how many watch this on the YouTube channel or Facebook Live, we'll probably be up over 100. And I believe that you were asking about Mr. Dave Bollinger, and I think he might be in the house somewhere on a cell phone, but I'm not sure. So he'd have to unmute himself to say hello to you. But Dave, you must have a question or two or comment. You want to unmute yourself? Or maybe he doesn't.
No, I do.
There you go.
I was starting to type it out, so I'm happy to get to stop typing because I don't type particularly well. What strikes me about your surprisingly good news about revenues, Ted, is if that hadn't happened, let's say there had been the shortfall even half of what you feared, I think a lot of people, including me, don't know exactly what would the county do. I mean, what would you do with the big shortfall? Do you have lines of credit you draw because, geez, 20 million on 400 million is 5%. Anybody sitting here, if next month your salary was to go down 5 or 10%, hopefully people would be able to handle that, but a lot of people wouldn't. And I wonder what the county would do.
Well, that's a good and very big question. Now, first, on the idea of line of credit, I'm sure we would be able to borrow, but I think I would have to argue against us doing that. You know, one thing to borrow to build a school, another to, keep paying the bills. Early on, we actually did begin an internal process to start saying, if things get bad, what choices can we make? Where would we go? And fortunately, we didn't have to get to the point of making any of those decisions, but we were preparing to have those conversations with the commissioners. And the way I was thinking about it, and like I said, we didn't actually get here, but I was picturing a process where we might say, if we lost $5 million, what set of choices would we make? If we lost 10 million, what set? And so on, to be prepared for how we would deal with it. I think the big idea to take away from it is there would be, whatever those choices were, there would be no way for us to make that kind of change without loss of service. Something would have gone away, something would become slower, something would be less. We don't have room, to absorb 30 million. We don't have room to absorb $5 million worth of change. We would have to do something. Something would have to be reduced to the public in order to have even a $5 million change. And that's always one of the tricky things for us is, when we start talking about reducing services, what do you reduce? Not everybody agrees on where you should go. And I'd say some people would violently disagree on what's the right place. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard somebody say, I understand you need to reduce the budget, but this is not the place to reduce it. But you can go around everywhere and hear the same thing from everybody, because we all are interested in different services.
Thank you, Ted. Thank you, Dave. Any follow-up on that?
Ted.
Okay. What other questions might we have? I know we had a comment. Lynn said that thanks for your talk, Ted. You are the original TED Talk. I like that. And I've heard from Miss Ann Bollinger that Dave's on the call, but he can't respond. So his streak's alive.
Streak's alive.
His streak's alive. All right, I'm giving a little space here if anybody has any questions. Ted, I really appreciate you coming on board and being as transparent as you are and helping people to plug in. And, you know, not only does Ted do this for us, but he also is the session leader for Leadership Carroll's Local Government Day. And that's a fun episode or fun exercise, I mean, that he puts folks through. If you've never been to Leadership Carroll, you should do it. And if you have, you'll remember Ted helping everybody to basically craft a budget for Carroll. And it's not easy because you've got your own little area that you want to work on. And Ted does a good job of letting people see the larger picture with that. And I want to thank you for that. Even though you are a Pittsburgh fan, I have to always bring that up. All right, any questions? We'll give you guys a couple more seconds to come up with some. If not, there's no harm in ending things a little sooner than we were planning on it.
I've got a question.
Okay.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Dean. This is Mr. Dean Camp.
And maybe this is a question for everybody else. I was wondering if Ted is the only one in this meeting who's wearing a tie.
Well, I'm certainly not because I don't like to. He might be. That's an excellent question. I like that.
I have to cop to not wearing a tie. Normally do.
Yeah, I have a certain image. Yeah, there are people who think I mow the lawn in a suit.
That's true. I had to wear one in high school. So after that, I was like, no more ties for me if I can avoid it. So thank you for that question. So once again, if somebody just tuned in now, or if you want to share this with like a friend, you'll find this link on the CMC site. It'll be on the Chamber's website, the Facebook page for CMC, their actual YouTube. It'll be all over the place. So you'll be able to watch this and have others watch it too. And don't forget all of our events, all of our members, 625 amazing local business folks are all at carrollcountychamber.org. Ted, I want to thank you so much for talking to the group today. All right. And as we sign off, I want to encourage you to keep your money as local as you possibly can. There's a lot of things we cannot control in life that can frustrate us, that people put so much time into. But some of the things that you can control are helping to keep a local business alive. And that means eating local, shopping local, buying gift cards, whatever it takes to keep some of these awesome jewels open here in Carroll. So I don't think I have anything else except to say, don't forget Leadership Carroll applications are open. And so is the Carroll Biz Challenge. Can help somebody walk away with 10 grand and a whole lot more. Ted, thank you once again. Thank you everybody for being on the call. And we will officially adjourn the meeting. Thank you.